In 1921, an epidemic of smallpox was declared in Kansas City. The only problem, there was no smallpox epidemic in Kansas City. In the early 1920s, Kansas City was enjoying great health as a city overall. The city was flourishing, and not very many people were getting sick, ill, or dying of disease. And this was great for the population of Kansas City, but it wasn't so great for the doctors who were struggling to make a living because people weren't falling ill, so they weren't getting patients, which are necessary for them to do business. With their usual stream of income dwindling, the doctors of Kansas City became determined to solve this problem. This is when they had a secret meeting of the Jackson Medical Society. During this meeting, the doctors of Kansas City resolved to make a fake epidemic in the city. They were going to artificially create an epidemic. But how did they go about making an epidemic? These are doctors, not God. They can't just breathe life into a new disease and spread it throughout the community. So how did they go about getting the entire population sick in order to line their pockets with money? Well, this is where things get even crazier. In order to make an epidemic, they simply said there was one, and everyone decided that they should believe them. The city declared an epidemic because that's what they decided to do at the secret meeting. And after declaring the epidemic, everyone started to freak out. People started visiting the doctor. People started getting sick because people thought they were sick even when they were still healthy, still flourishing. And this started to make money for the city, the doctors, but their devious plan, their secret plan, didn't stop there. A lot of people in Kansas City still hadn't really bought into the idea of a smallpox epidemic. So the doctors came up with another way to lend even more credibility to their fake epidemic. This was through Vaccination Day. At public buildings and schools, teachers, students, parents, the whole community was able to get vaccinated free of charge. This added a sense of credibility to the epidemic. Why would the government be administering free vaccines if there wasn't actually an epidemic? And so the entirety of the population of Kansas City began to buy in to this fake epidemic. But the repercussion of these actions, of these vaccines, were far from harmless, and it wasn't just the reputation of the doctors that would eventually be lost. This is when Dr. True Ott sets foot in the arena. He's a medical doctor and a talk show host, and he's interested in health and medicine-related issues, and he lives near Kansas City, so he has all the reason to investigate the 1921 Kansas City smallpox epidemic. Armed with the advantage of hindsight, he was able to look at things that nobody had considered before, consider statistics and facts in an entirely different way. With all of this information, he embarked upon a quest to uncover the truth about the true repercussions of this epidemic. What he discovered was absolutely astonishing. As he delved into historical records and court documents, he found some of the most unbelievable things. Here's what he had to say about that. Quote, "In the weeks and months following the mass vaccinations, the area's hospital beds were filled to overflowing with vaccine-induced smallpox cases." What Dr. Ott had just discovered was that the mass vaccinations upon the population of Kansas City after the declaration of an epidemic had led to people actually getting smallpox. So even though there was no real epidemic and a fake epidemic was created, the mass vaccinations resulted in a real epidemic. They actually made people sick. From the doctor's point of view, this is of course amazing. Now people are getting sick and you're making money as a doctor. Now people have to go to the doctor. They have to come see you. They have to give you their money because they want to be healthy again. But this obviously is horrible for the people of Kansas City who are now getting sick again. And now we have to look back at history and think about the question of intent. Were these vaccines not supposed to cause the smallpox, but they accidentally did? Were they supposed to be harmless? Or did the doctors plan to create an epidemic with the vaccines to justify them declaring an epidemic. Is that possible? Looking at how our medical establishment, the medical experts in the entirety of the country have acted over the last 5 years, there's a lot of parallels to be drawn, and I think in those parallels, we can find the truth. In 2021, following the 2020 outbreak of coronavirus, there was a massive push to get everyone vaccinated. This would sound very familiar to someone alive in Kansas City in 1921, as they had a massive push as well to get everyone vaccinated. As we have seen, those 1921 vaccines cause people to get sick, cause people to get smallpox, and really the vaccines weren't protecting from anything because there was no epidemic to speak of. In the aftermath of this 1921 Kansas City smallpox epidemic disaster, people lost faith in the medical establishment. It's very interesting to look at all these parallels, and I think what it goes to show is that you should always do your own research before talking to a doctor. It's important not to blindly accept what authorities are telling you to do or saying is true. You need to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. By doing your own research and drawing your own conclusions, you can make sure that you aren't being lied to like the people of Kansas City in 1921 during the alleged smallpox epidemic.